think, though. So, all right. Well, I am welcoming Sarah Kaminsky to this awesome edition of Beers and Barbells, the babes of GPT. Show me your drink, girl. That's the rule.
It's not a beer.
We're frowning at you, but it's fine. So I wanted to give everyone just an idea of who you are. So if you could just give us a quick introduction, who you are, where you're from, how old you are, how long you've been training, like that kind of stuff.
Sure. My name is Sarah, and I am 41 years old. I've been training since 2012. Prior to that, I was running until I started to gain too much weight, and that got really uncomfortable, so I started lifting instead. And I'm from Connecticut. I've lived here and other places in New England most of my life, and I live in Milford right now.
Nice. With your menagerie of animals, as I understand.
Yes, I have 2 cats and 1 dog.
Nice. So what got you in? So were you always a power lifter? Like what got you into training?
Well, I've always trained, well, no, I can't say that. So I first started lifting when I was running, and it was kind of to, enhance my running and hopefully make me a better, stronger, faster runner. So I was doing very much like your typical circuit training, dumbbells, machines, high reps, low weight. And I thought that strength training was really boring. And I didn't like to do it because I thought I'm just standing here and I'm counting and this is stupid and I hate it and I just want to be running. And like, if this is what it takes to be a better runner, maybe I don't want to do it. And then I got to a point with running where I really got burned out on it. And I was finding myself gaining weight, which, at the time I didn't want to believe was because I was cutting back on my mileage. So I wasn't exercising as much. And like, I was like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And like, my body's all fucked up or whatever. And turns out it was just because I wasn't really running. And I ended up hurting my foot really bad. And I had to stop running for a brief period of time. And during that time, I was like kind of freaking out, like, what am I going to do? And, how am I going to fill my time? And I started reading about strong lifts 5x5. So I was doing that. Like I just started with barbell training.
Just by yourself?
Yeah, just by myself. Read like as much on the internet and books as I could about barbell training and went from there. That was 2012. And then I told myself, once I learned that powerlifting was a thing, because I really missed the competition of running, I said, I'm going to train for a year and then I'm going to do a powerlifting meet. So that's what I did.
Nice. Yeah. So I know that when did you start training with other people?
God, I'm trying to think when I started training with other people. So I started going to Poundstone Performance Training Center in Waterbury, which is no longer open. I want to say it was probably maybe 2015 or something like that, or 2016. So it was a couple of years into it. Like I'd already done several meets by the time I started training with other people. Like I was always coaching myself and, just kind of getting all my information from the internet and, really kind of directionless. And that was the first time I really started training with other people. And then that gym closed, maybe after I'd been there for a couple of years. And then we all kind of migrated to GPT.
Did you find that there was a big difference between training on your own and then training with a team?
Definitely, yeah. Like it went from being just a thing that I did that was more for my own personal fitness goals or what have you, to being kind of like the center of my social life. Like finally, it was like a sport that I made friends in, which is kind of weird because you think of it as an individual sport, but it's really not. So yeah, I mean, I found myself enjoying training a little bit more and training longer because I was training with other people, which wasn't really something that I ever really imagined would be something I'd want to do. But hey, it worked out.
And here you are.
Yeah, here I am today.
So what do you think that the biggest effect of strength training has been outside of the gym?
Outside of the gym, I don't know. I mean, I think like, I mean, just from a practicality standpoint, like I'm a woman who lives alone and I have to do a lot of stuff for myself. So like, for example, last summer I put together like this giant like lounge chair, like a hammock chair that was a 2-person job according to the instruction manual. And I'm like, well, who the hell's going to help me with this? Like, I don't want to wait for, to have somebody come over and help me. So I was able to do the whole thing by myself, like hoisting this 60-pound chair up, over my head. And, so like little things like that, it's just kind of a practical thing, and there's definitely like some downsides too of like when people find out at work that I lift or whatever, that think it makes me aggressive or scary or, so that's kind of like the dark side of outside of lifting.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually going to return to that later because I feel
Okay.
like a lot of women like deal with a lot of adversity around their strength training that men just don't get.
Right.
But in terms of lifting, so I already know the answer to this, but let the world know. So what is your favorite lift and why? And then what is your least favorite lift and why?
Okay, it's changing, I'd like to say, because it's always been the bench press as my favorite, only because I remember reading like when I first started lifting with a barbell that like, oh, most women can't even lift the empty bar when they start, and you might have to start with dumbbells. And I remember being really scared when I picked up just the empty barbell for the first time, because I thought, oh my God, this might get stapled to my chest, but it doesn't really seem that heavy. So let me try it, and I did it. So I think like immediately it kind of stroked my ego and it made me want to train really hard at the bench. So I don't really think like I have any kind of natural talent for it. I just really enjoy doing it. Maybe because it's a little bit more technical too. So like you could kind of compensate for being not so strong with like improving your technique over time. Whereas like the deadlift, for example, which is traditionally been my least favorite, although I've been enjoying it more and more lately. That's really more, it's less technical, even though I do pull sumo, which is obviously more technical than conventional, but like, I feel like that's more of like for people who are just really naturally strong, which I'm not. So I suck at it and therefore I don't like it.
It's so funny because I completely disagree with you, but this is not my interview.
Well, why do you disagree with me? Let's argue.
The thing is I think that like you're right. Technique on bench is like you absolutely need technique or you're gonna suck, unless you're someone crazy like Marisa Inda who can just like bring her elbows out and just like
Right.
touch her chest like that and have absolutely zero tuck whatsoever and press like 215 at a 52 or whatever.
Right. Right.
I just think that for what we do, no matter what you're doing, your baseline strength matters. So even if like your technique is off or whatever, you've definitely ground through some lifts where you're like, oh, like something went wrong,
Yeah.
my technique broke down, but I still got the lift, you know?
Right. Right.
So
Like that squat that I did right before everything shut down.
exactly. So I think that you really do. I mean, I think that obviously technique is very important. And the more you work on your technique, the more your strength will show through. But I think that you have to have that baseline strength in order to perform at, a certain level.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't really see myself as performing at a certain level though. I mean, I
You
guess
do
I just
though.
think of myself as, kind of a middle of the road. Like I'm not terrible, but I'm not great. And, that's my place in the world.
That's where most of us fall, though. I mean, in
Right,
terms
right.
of like just statistics, we're not all up here. We're not
Right,
all
right.
down here. We're kind of like in here somewhere.
Some of us were born to be average.
Listen, I'm embracing my mediocrity.
Mediocrity, that's the
That's the
word.
one that I want.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So what do you think is the biggest struggle you faced as a lifter?
um, it's probably, I guess a little bit of analysis paralysis and not really knowing what I want out of the sport and how to get there, if that makes any sense. Like
Yeah.
I was directionless for a really long time. Like I said, when I first started training for years, I had no coach. I was using like online programs that I found, like free programs, which I'm not denigrating free programs at all, but I think like if you're the kind of person like me where, you know, you're going to cherry pick and take things out of a program that you don't like, and like, oh, I saw this cool thing on Instagram, I'm going to throw this into, you know, my routine and all of that, like that you definitely are doing yourself a disservice. And that's what I was doing for a really long time. And then I kind of fell into like the whole like federation thing too, where like I didn't really know like what federation I wanted to lift in and like where I kind of belonged in the powerlifting world. Because when I first started, which was, you know, not really that long ago, like I first competed in 2013, there was no such thing as USAPL in Connecticut. Like when I first started, like there was no presence at all. So I did RPS, and you know, and then like USAPL kind of came on the scene, and it, you know, started to make less and less sense for me to compete in this federation that I felt comfortable in, because I don't use performance enhancing drugs. So like, why would I do myself a disservice and continue to compete in that federation? But at the same time, like I felt comfortable there. So like it was, you know, it a kind of a little bit like that too. And then like getting overly focused on, oh my God, I'm going on forever about all
No,
these
please. This is
problems,
great.
but I got very, very focused on, you know, just comparing myself to others, which has been like probably my biggest downfall. And that really messed me up for a long time, where, you know, I was getting bent out of shape because people who were training for like half the time that I did or even less were just absolutely crushing my numbers, you know. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Well, what's wrong with me is like I didn't have the same athletic background that they did. I didn't have the same genetics that they did. I didn't have the same like schedule that they did, and you know, like a million different factors. And now I know like it makes no sense to compare myself to those people. But at the time, like it was like, well, this isn't fair, and what's wrong with me, and like why can't I do this? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it was so funny because that was exactly what Kristen brought up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't know if it's I think it's like a generally a lifter thing, but for some reason I find that women are so much harder on themselves,
Oh yeah.
and it seems to be like that specific issue of comparing yourself to other people
Mm-hmm.
seems to be like, at least when I talk about lifting with women, it's like literally the first thing that comes up.
Right, right. But I think like that's just natural for women in sports in general as well, just because that was my experience as a runner as well, you know. Like I would show up at like a local 5K and I would zero in on like there's always the girl, there's always at least one girl that's wearing like bun huggers, like the really small, like they're even smaller than the booty shorts that we wear. Like they literally
Oh,
just,
like
yeah,
smaller
they're
than the booty
like
shorts I wear though.
even smaller than those. They're like underwear
Woo!
practically. Like that's why they call them bun huggers, right? And I'm like, that girl's gonna kick my ass. Like I immediately start zeroing in on that person, and like for no good reason. It's literally just her fashion choice. But at the end of the day, the girl that's wearing the tie-dye shirt is always gonna beat you. That's just a rule. That's just a straight up rule. If you're wearing a tie-dye shirt, you're gonna destroy everybody. I don't know why.
Not being a runner and have
No.
never been a runner, I have no clue what you're talking about, but I
It's,
believe you.
I'm telling you, it's like this sloppily dressed person that looks like they've never run a day in their lives, and they just mop the floor with everybody. And you know why? Because they don't care, because they're cool. You know
Because
what I
they're not
mean?
getting chafed by their bun huggers.
Exactly.
So on the flip side of that coin, what do you think is your biggest triumph as a lifter?
Has there been a triumph?
Oh, for God's sake.
I don't, you know what? When I started doing equip lifting and started with single ply bench, I think that was probably some of my proudest moments, was except for that one time that I bombed out, which, you know, is kind of a rite of passage, I suppose. But, you know, just having those successful meets, doing single ply, that's probably my biggest accomplishment, because it's so much more challenging. And just to go up there and do something that like nobody really understands what you're doing or like what the point is, like it's kind of fun, you know. So that's probably my biggest triumph, is making that switch to single ply and actually somehow being somewhat successful at it. And by successful, I mean like not breaking records, but like actually getting on the board.
Absolutely. And so I was actually probably going to save these questions for the end, but now that we're talking about geared lifting, I would love to know just a little bit more about what it is that you like about it, what it is that you don't like about it, what it is that brought you to it.
Well, I'll start with what brought me to it, which was goes back to what I was talking about before, which is kind of getting burned out on powerlifting in general and all of that, like not really knowing what I wanted to do and really loving the bench press. And I thought, well, why don't I just take some time and do some bench only meets? And then I thought about it and I'm like, well, if you're going to do bench only, like do bench only, you know, do it equipped and learn something new and try to like put up the biggest numbers that you could possibly put up. And so that was why I made that initial switch. What I love about it is it's being able to lift an irresponsible amount of weight that you should not be able to lift. And it's kind of like a rush. Like it's almost like a euphoria, like when you complete like a, you know, a lift that really just knocks the wind out of you and was really, really challenging. It's kind of like a high, you know, it's like you see stars and like you have that head rush and it's kind of, it's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it, which you have, but you know, somebody else wouldn't know, but it's really kind of a unique experience that I've never really experienced in any kind of, you know, athletic endeavor before. What I don't like about it is, and I guess it's kind of one of the things that's awesome at the same time, is just the uncertainty factor, and like anything can happen. Like you can prepare and you can think that you're doing, you know, everything that you're supposed to do. Your nutrition's on point, you're getting enough sleep, you're hitting all of your lifts and training, and you could just bomb out because something went wrong the day of, like, and there's like nothing that you could have done to control that. So, I mean, that kind of sucks, but at the same time, like, you know, the upside to it is that like that could happen to anybody, you know, and it could happen to people that would have beaten you normally, and look at that, you won, you know, so like that's cool too.
Absolutely. Now, like, do you have any like words of wisdom for somebody who's never tried gear who would like to maybe dabble?
I would just say, I mean, it's the same thing that like Ryan says, and which is just to try loose fitting gear and don't try to put on something like if it took two people to help you get something on, like that's not, you know, that's not the shirt or the suit that you should start with. Try something that you can put on by yourself and try to, you know, live with people who've done it before and know what they're doing. Like definitely it's not something that you want to do like at a commercial gym or something like that. Like come to GPT and we'll help you out.
Absolutely. Plug.
Mm-hmm. See how I did that?
I did. You pivoted. I love it. So now we're going to get into some more like definitely like female specific questions.
Okay.
The first of which is training around your period. So
Mm-hmm.
what, like, I know that some people don't change anything at all, but some people, you know, have strategies for how they train around their cycle or whatever.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know if like that is something that you experienced.
Yeah, for sure. Just to get it all out there for those who don't know me, I had a total laparoscopic hysterectomy over a year ago, so I don't actually get a period anymore. Haha.
Dirty.
But yeah, but when I did, for me, I noticed that a week before I would actually get my period. So like when I'm in like PMS range, I called that my week. Because I really would struggle, especially with bench press. Because, you know, like if you're losing weight or like anytime that your health is compromised, usually the bench press is the first thing that kind of goes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I was experiencing. I didn't really necessarily change my training, although I think that Ryan would try to anticipate it and like not give me a heavy bench day when I was in that week. And he tried to like keep that coordinated because at the time I was on hormonal birth control, so it was like clockwork where I knew like every 4 weeks it was going to be really rough. Luckily I never entered into a situation where I had a meet during week, but you know, sometimes that's kind of out of your control. I still do kind of experience it to a certain degree because while I don't have a uterus, I do have ovaries. So I still have a cycle. I just don't have a period.
Mm-hmm.
So I still from time to time experience it, but I'm not quite able to put my finger on like when it's going to happen and how bad it's going to be. So it's a little bit less of something that we could really work around. And now it's just kind of like, it's definitely something that I could use as an excuse when I have a bad training session. Well, maybe I'm in my week, you know?
Yep. No, and I honestly feel the same way. I mean, I don't really change up my training, but I know like the heaviest days of my period, I feel like garbage. I have no energy.
Yep.
And it's impossible to drag myself to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get there, I'm just like, let it be light, please, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're losing blood too, which definitely drains you of your energy. And that's part of the reason why I had the hysterectomy, because like my periods were insane. They were so heavy that like I had no energy and they were lasting for a couple of weeks. So that really sucked.
Yeah, absolutely. So this next one, I know that you and I are going to bond over.
Uh-huh.
So
What, as if we're not already bonded? Come on.
like this. So I know that you and I both deal with stress incontinence.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to know, like, during your training, how are you dealing with it? Like, what are your feelings about it? Have you done anything to kind of mitigate it at all? Like, how's your experience been?
You know what I do to mitigate it? I wear a diaper.
Me too. Hashtag team diaper. I did that last time too.
I have no shame. There's no shame in my game. It used to be something that really bothered me. Like when I first started to do it, first of all, I'll just go back. Like when I first started to do it, it was really only with deadlifts. And as time went on, it was also squats. Probably as I got stronger and had stronger squats, that's where it started to happen. And I used to find it really distracting and it really bothered me. And it was, I felt really self-conscious about it, mainly because I wasn't always prepared for it. So I would feel like embarrassed or whatever. And there's like pee on the floor and everybody's watching me. And it was really just a stressful situation. So I just started wearing diapers. And I do it every single time I deadlift and every single time I squat, whether it's heavy or light. I mean, I don't wear them for like goblet squats or RDLs or something like that. Like if I'm just doing like accessory type variants on, squats and deadlifts. But, anytime I'm doing a competition squat or a front squat or like belt squats, I'll wear them or, any kind of heavy deadlift. That being said, I've only peed once in gear. So I don't know why. Yeah. I think
Me
it's
too,
just
just one time.
together. Yeah. And it was like a max deadlift and that was it. So
Right, this the same thing happened to me.
Yeah,
It was so weird. Because usually squat, like I gotta double pad up for squat.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And I squatted like 357 in the gear or something stupid like that. I mean, like super high, but but still, like I was expecting to pee and I just didn't.
Right.
So I don't know what that's about. Gear is magic, apparently.
It's, it's another point for gear. I will say, like, after I had my hysterectomy, I thought it was going to get better because I had the whole reason why in the first place is because I had a fibroid that was about yay big, that was in my uterus. And it was causing me all that extra bleeding, but also it was putting a lot of pressure on my bladder as well as my colon, if I remember correctly. It was some kind of poop related organ. So it was putting a lot of pressure on like everything and just making a big mess.
Oh.
So I thought that it was going to be like an instant cure. And like if I just, took it slow and rebuilt strength, like I wouldn't have the stress incontinence, but I still do. And in fact, it's worse. Like now I pee on good mornings too. It's awesome. So Ryan just stopped giving me good mornings. Because I'm like, this really sucks.
Well, he continues to give me squats and deadlifts, which I always pee on. So
I mean, it would be nice if you could just take those away, you know, but unfortunately in the sport of powerlifting, you do kind of have to work on your squats and your deadlifts, so you can't really work around that. I have talked to my doctor about it, and she mentioned like either doing PT or like having the surgery where you have the sling put in. But
A
the sling
sling.
surgery, yeah, it's like this weird sling. They usually give them to women that have had like several children, and they have it from that, which doesn't really apply to you and me. So I'm like, I don't really want to do that. First of all, I don't want to have another major surgery. And second of all, I don't want to recover from another surgery. Like if I don't have to, I'm not going to have a voluntary one. And
Yeah.
my whole thing with PT is this is the United States of America. We have the worst health insurance in the world, bar none. And I am not going to pay, you know, out of pocket for every single time I have to go to a physical therapist. So it's just not worth it to me. If we had, you know, a different sort of healthcare system where I could get the care that I needed or it was a lot less expensive, I would 100% pursue it. But it's not worth it for me. Like I'll just wear a diaper. They cost very little if you buy the Amazon brand, you know, it's fine.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that one. Although I buy the fancy Depends that cost a bunch of money.
I like those Depends.
They come
That's
in
like,
full.
you know what? Those are for meats. Those are for special occasions. Like I feel like day to day.
It's like for date night.
Somebody's going to see you in them, you know?
So circling back to like talking to your coworkers about your training, because it's like such obviously a big part of your life.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced any adversity, and specifically as a woman, about strength training or about your physique or about anything like that?
I think adversity might be a little dramatic of a word, but I've definitely been annoyed by like some of people's responses. Like, first of all, I didn't talk about lifting for a really long time at the office, to the point where, because it is such a big part of my life, I wasn't talking about my life at the office at all. And I felt like that was kind of to the detriment of my career, like to be so kind of closed. And, you know, I didn't want to seem like somebody who was just very serious and, you know, very businesslike or whatever. And I felt like I should open up a little bit more with my coworkers. So I started talking about it a little bit, you know, not to the point where, like, if you've ever known somebody that's run a marathon, of course you have, because it's all they ever talk about. Like, I just will mention it from time to time. You know, I get up at 4:00 in the morning and I train, and, you know, that's why I'm tired or whatever, and that kind of thing. And I found that some of the reactions have been a little obnoxious, like just the whole like conflating strength with being a violent person, or you know, I already kind of have been told that I'm like intimidating in the office as it is, so it kind of compounds that.
Mm.
Physique, it's probably a little bit different for me as an 84, because people probably don't expect that somebody that is a little bit heavier actually trains very hard 5 days a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I probably don't get the same comments that a lot of other people get, because I think like when you see me in office clothes and you see that I'm a little bit bigger than like some of the other girls in the office, they might just assume that I'm like really fat or something like that, you know?
No, but I think that like there's definitely a judgment on our bodies one way or the other.
Oh yeah, you can't win. You cannot win.
Yeah. I mean, if you're lean, then you're a man. And if you're,
Right.
you know, like in a 72 or an 84, then you don't train.
Right.
Like,
Yep, you're a slob, you know?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
somebody told me one time, like that, what made me stop posting on Reddit. What did he tell me? He said, "Put down the Burger King, you look like a whale." I'm like, thanks. I don't eat at Burger King, dude. I eat at Wendy's, but thanks.
God. God, the internet is like, Reddit is such a cesspool.
Oh, it's the worst. It is the worst.
So, now that we've talked about like basically all the fun stuff, all of the bleeding and the peeing, I do want to ask you about like GPT specifically. So, like, how do you feel like being at GPT and training there has molded you as an athlete?
Well, I can tell you that if I never went to GPT, I never would have gone into equip lifting ever, you know, because why would it ever have been exposed to me? Why, you know, who would ever be able to help me? So it's definitely completely changed the direction that I've gone in my lifting. I'd probably still be doing my own programs and, you know, just kind of directionless and wondering why I wasn't making any progress. Because even though I did have some minor, I don't want to name names because I don't want to talk shit, but I did have some other coaching before I went to Ryan. Like it was very much like cookie cutter programming, you know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's definitely changed the course of my lifting. And like I said, I mean, I'm not like an elite lifter and I never will be, but I am able to pat myself on the back and be proud of the work that I'm doing.
Absolutely. So I've only got a couple more for you here. I'm trying to like I'm kind of skipping all around and trying to be like make this conversational. Um,
You're doing a good job. It's okay.
Thanks, man. So I did want to talk to you a little bit about mindset.
Okay.
So is there like when you're training day to day versus like training for a meet or at meet day, are there any mindset tips that you can give anyone?
Um, so the thing that I do, and you know, I'm kind of a liar right now because I've been just doing the bare minimum since this whole quarantine, COVID-19 horribleness started. But
Also,
prior to this, what I was doing that was really helping me with just mindset in general, was when I finished my training, whether it's, you know, maybe the night after or immediately after if I have time, I sit down and I write down my sets and my reps, which a lot of people do. But then I write at least one paragraph, preferably more, about my training session itself, how it went, how I felt, if it went wrong, why I felt like it did and what I could work on for next time. If it went well, why I felt like it did. And just, you know, various thoughts and, you know, whatever came to mind about my training session. Um, it's not, I got the idea from Pete Alonso, who's my favorite Met, because he does that after every Mets game, writes down his thoughts on the game. And, you know, he was rookie of the year and won the home run derby and, you know, is probably somebody that we could emulate in some way. Um, so that's really helped me to kind of reframe the way that I look at my training in general, because in the past I always used to be really down on myself because I would just look at the bad training sessions and I would get so focused on the bad training sessions that I would forget that maybe like 90% of my training sessions were really positive and really good. It's just that they went out of my mind because good training sessions aren't usually memorable. You only really remember them if you hit a PR, and how often does that happen, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. Especially when you've been training since, 2013. I think I started in 2014. So you and I are
Yeah,
pretty much, you know, in the same boat there.
right.
I think that's a really great strategy, actually. I might start to do that.
You should. I highly recommend it.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Hey, I, he's, there's a three-legged pit bull trying to crash our session right now. Um, I actually just have one more question for you.
Sure.
And that would be if you could change anything at all about strength sports, what
Mm.
would it be?
Oh, I would probably eliminate the sexualization of women in strength sports. That would be nice. That would be very nice because I feel like it happens more in our sport than in a lot of others. Like nobody really, I mean, you see, don't get me wrong, you see horrifically misogynistic comments about women in every sport, but usually you don't see the comments about the personal appearance of women unless it's, you know, just really, really negative troll-like comments about women that participate in sports like basketball or soccer or whatever. They'll just compare themselves to them athletically, you know, and claim that oh, I could destroy, the UConn women's basketball team when I was in 7th grade or whatever,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Okay. But it seems like in strength sports, there's a lot of focus on women's bodies that is unnecessary and has nothing to do with the actual lifting that we do, whether it's, the smaller women and some of the overly sexual comments that they get, or the larger women that, get really horrific comments about their bodies as well. I just feel like it's kind of disproportionately directed at strength athletes, or maybe that's just where my focus is, but I would definitely,
Well, if you
very much
follow
like to get
You
rid of
Look Like a
that.
Man, then
Oh,
like that's
yes, I
all.
do. Yes,
Yeah,
I
I know,
do.
but I definitely agree with you. And I think that, I mean, what we're doing with our bodies is nobody else's business.
Right.
So, and to see a lot of those comments, especially directed at strength sport athletes, it's upsetting.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right. So I'm actually, now that my dog is screaming, and he will not stop until I attend to him, I think that we're all set.
All right. Well, I'm almost finished with my wine.
You need to drink that. Drink it up. Thank you very much.